So there are these national policies, and then even today they're continuing in Dusseldorf specifically to be certain subsidies. Do you want to talk a little bit about sort of artist studio spaces and how that works?
I'm not the expert.
No, Susanne,
what do you mean? That the city is providing art spaces or studio spaces, or
you were talking about a program that they had where if you bought a building and you do.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, no, it's like it's a way. It's a good way for the city to help artists find studios. Like if you walk around and you see a sign for rent, you talk to the landlord, and you're looking for a studio, of course. And turns out you get a 10-year lease, but you need to renovate the place. That you go back to the city and tell them about it, and they help you sign that contract, that lease, and will help you renovate it. They will pay for it because they know, but it has to be 10 years because they know because the city feels responsible for supplying all the artists that come from the academy with studios, so they stay in the area, don't go somewhere else.
Not all.
So,
not all the artists.
No, not all the artists, but I mean some artists. I don't have a studio like that, but I know that some people, if they want to, they could get support. It's a way of trying to keep people in the city. And
artists specifically, or just people in general?
Artists. It's artists.
Why?
It's got to say in the lease that it's an artist studio, and
Why?
it has to stay that way for 10 years, even if the artist who signs the lease leaves after 5 years. It has to be rented out to another artist. That's the deal.
Why does the city care so much about artists? I mean, San Francisco doesn't do that. I mean, why does that make sense? It must make sense financially in some ways.
Well, it's kind of the image of the city. I mean, it's also known for fashion and advertising. So, you know, they know it has that tradition that we talked about, but they also know it's good for the city and the quality of life there to be able to say we have all these great artists here who give something back to the city. And it's true, because it is a small town, but, you know, I'd say, you know, it has an art scene that's as big as a place like Berlin, but in a much smaller place. So you feel it much more.
I think it's pretty unique because Cologne doesn't do that anymore. Cologne for a long time has been really the center of the art world as well, with like the first art fair, etc. But the politicians over there missed this point, supporting the artists. And therefore, this comparison between both cities is really interesting to look at. Cologne is bankrupt, Düsseldorf is not. And therefore, it's still able to really come up with all these ideas supporting artists. That's really quite fascinating. And Düsseldorf still is listed at the 6th as a city with the highest level of quality life in the world. It's really, probably it's part of you know, this whole infrastructure as well.
I mean, it sounds great. Free art school, free, I mean, studio subsidies. So, Stefan, why did you move here? I mean, why did you come and teach here?
Well, I went to school here, and later on I taught at the Art Institute. The weather, I don't know, many reasons. I mean, like, you know, I was born in Düsseldorf. So when I applied for the academy and I was accepted, I was really young. And when I was finished with school, I really had the feeling I need to see something else, because I'd lived there all my life. So I decided to come to San Francisco, which I still love and still my favorite place. But there are so many reasons why I like it here. So I'm not somebody who went back to Dusseldorf because I feel like I couldn't have developed here. I could have developed here as well. I think it's great to have all these good things like a government or a city helping you out. It's good. But there's also a downside to it, but that's not happening in Düsseldorf. But I'd call it the Dutch model. where, you know, where a government really gives all the, you know, supports all the art, doesn't mean it's good art when everybody can survive. So I think, you know, there's also some truth about, you know, being forced to maybe quit being an artist if you're not successful enough, or to continue if you really want to do it. Like, I don't believe in, you know, supporting, like everybody should get money for being an artist. So for me, coming here, you know, it was a totally different situation because I had no more cheap apartment or cheap studio and help from the city.
And can you talk specifically about the differences in terms of like curriculum and structure and the different, in the, say, the Art Institute where you've taught versus the Kunstakademie?
Well, the biggest difference is, we talked about that earlier, is really, it's like two completely different models of teaching and philosophy behind it. And I'd say the Dusseldorf model would be, you do 1 year where you're like really free to do whatever you want to do once you're accepted in the academy, and then you kind of look at what you've done and you go
does that mean trying a bunch of different mediums to see if you like woodworking or painting? Or, okay.
For example, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a painter, so I did these little animations with my Super 8 camera, and I wasn't sure, should I go and approach Namjoon Paik, who was teaching at the academy, or should I approach Gerd Richter or some other painter? And so the idea is, do whatever you want to do for 1 year. Nobody's gonna like criticize you. And after 1 year, make a decision and approach one of these teachers and see if they want to take you in their class.
So you have to court them, like introduce yourself?
You go, you have to call them, or, you know, wait for them. That's him, okay, jump. And hope, because they don't have to accept you. So it's not like you're taking different classes or, you know, collecting points or whatever. It's nothing like that. It's almost like you have that one guy or that one teacher that you admire, and once this person accepts you, that's the deal. It's like for the rest of your life, kind of. That's the idea. You have 4 more years or 5 more years with that person. You'll get a studio space and the phone number, and, you know, you'll get together and do something, you know, talk about art. But it's really personal. I mean, like, one reason why I wanted to come to San Francisco after having gone to the Kunstakademie in Düsseldorf was I had the feeling I also wanted some more input from other teachers. And this is, I think, the big difference is, like, here you have many teachers and you have classes that you take, and you might have a different teacher 1 year, next year somebody completely different. So 2 completely different worlds, but I was interested in trying both. I'm not sure which is the better system, but I'd say maybe a compromise would be good.
I think the Dusseldorf Photographic School is a very good example for that. Bernd and Hilla Becher taught at the Dusseldorf Academy, and they formed a whole group of students around them who studied artistic photography, and they became a world-famous group of artists like Thomas Wolf, Struth, Gursky, and you probably know the names. And I think this is possible when you stick to the relationship between student and teacher much easier than as if you have to, you swap or you change every semester being with someone else. I think the Bechers wouldn't have had this immense influence on their people if teaching system would be different.
Yeah.
But I was actually very surprised to hear that. I mean, I always thought of the Kunstakademie as like the painting department and the photography department. Like there must be these deep intellectual engagements about the relationship between the two. And the reality, from what I understand, is that The photography darkroom is a couple miles away, and they don't even actually really interact at the school. Or Bernhard, like you were saying, that you would go to Richter's studio.
Yes, but it was his decision. He wanted that we have the possibility to paint the whole day and the whole night, because we had to earn money to live. And so and the academy was open from 9 to 9, from 9 to 8. And to avoid this, he went with his studio to another place and lived his old studio for the class. And everybody wanted to get the key, and we could work as we wanted. So the whole night long, it was necessary. And also we could also sleep there, and it was very dense in the class. And, the influence in the class was more, because it was very competitive, we learned more from each other than from the teacher. Rita came once a week, and we discussed a lot, but it was, there were very interesting painters there in the class, and we learned much more from each other.
Could you say a little bit about the downside of influence, the challenges of working under someone so closely?
No,
and how do you, as an artist, kind of break free from, sort of being Richter's student and being, kind of pushed into the categorization of being derivative in some way, and to find your own voice and your own audience, while still kind of capitalizing on having been Richter's student?
Yes, one is always influenced by things. Richter has a very strong work. He tried very much things in painting. Perhaps he's not so good, not as a good example as other teachers are, which had a personal style. Richter hadn't a style. He didn't love the idea of style. What he organized, he invited Dan Graham, or he invited other artists, he and his wife, Lisa Genskin, were in friendship with, to come to the class and to have a discussion and influence from the other artists, because he knew about the problem. We discussed Stefan talked about that it's one meaning so strong that there is no other influence from other artists. It's actually it's a problem of teaching, but this I don't know how to come away from things one learned and one was interested in, one lived as one.
Do we think the model's going to change with Tony Cragg as the new director?
Perhaps yes, I think so.
Is it going to, do you have a sense of there being any motion afoot to diversify kind of the way the program is taught and the different teachers that are brought in? Or?
I'd say, one has to know that teaching at the academy is different than teaching here. First of all, they get paid really well. And it's kind of an honor. Like, if you look at the list of teachers there, you'd say, okay, all these teachers don't need to teach at all for the rest of their life. I mean, they don't even have to do any art anymore if they wanted to. But they still want to teach there. So it's
Who are you thinking about in specific when you?
Well, if you look at the whole list, starting with Richter or going to Peter Doig, who teaches painting and who lives in the Caribbean and flies to Dusseldorf once in a while, shows up, and talks about Namjoon Paik lived in New York, when he was teaching in Dusseldorf. But he, all these people came and wanted to teach there, and it's for sure not because of the money. So, and somebody like Tony Craig, he has enough public sculptures to do that, he doesn't have to be the director, but he still wants to do it. And I think that has to do with the fact that, it's always interesting. There is an exchange between all these famous teachers. I mean, the idea is, okay, I think, for a student, it's really interesting to be able to say, okay, here's my hero. Like somebody I know from before I was an artist, from books, and you can look up to this person, and I could actually be his student. And I think it will lead to something where you make a big step already, because you don't have to understand the system or go to some place like New York and try to make it before you meet all these people. You can meet them right away while you're a student, and it becomes like a normal thing. So in a way, you can like relax and look at your work and figure out what you want to do. So I think it's good, and so that won't change with Tony Craig. What is changing is that Tony Craig maybe has a different idea than the former director Luppertz, who would bring in people who are his buddies, or if you look at the list of certain galleries in the world, who are, artists who were showing in the same galleries that he showed. Like Immendorf or Penck or, like all these people. And I think Tony Craig is kind of more independent. So I look forward, to see who else is going to be teaching there.
Does it have any bearing that he's a sculptor? I mean, that it's, we kind of think photography and painting. But
there was also
there's
always
been
sculpture. So I think it's good that Tony Craig is the new director.
Yes.
And he's an international artist, but who has lived the last 35 years in Germany. So he knows both worlds. I mean, he's like somebody, who's been in the Rhineland, but also has been having shows all over the world. So he'll be able to get more interesting artists to teach there.
Yeah, I wanted to say Dusseldorf Art School is not only a painting school. We have got a very, very important department of sculpture and installation. Mm-hmm. There are some teachers who are very, very good, and especially the young generations, the generation of the students, I think there are some very good people in the class of Hubert Kitzoll or Rita McBride, and there have been people like Rinke who had very good students, Rabinovich. So there are lots of people also in the three-dimensional art
world.
Yeah.
Could you make a few comments on the feedback from the community, the interaction with the community and the collectors? New York is partially famous, probably mostly famous because it has such a wealthy collection of collectors. Chicago was able to do its type of art, again, because it was industrial and had a fair amount of money. So there's this feedback going on, and I'd like you to comment on that.
Shall I answer? Düsseldorf has got traditionally quite a cultivated image, and it had a lot of money because it was the city of administration of the whole coal area in the north, the Ruhrgebiet. And so with the museums and the collections being there was also very early a big community of people being interested in art and also supporting art, buying art. And not only in Düsseldorf, and also in Cologne, Bonn, Aachen. And in the very big museums also helped that there is a certain atmosphere. And so I think when I came to Düsseldorf, I came because it was a center. It was a very important center of art market, and it still is.
So does that mean there are many galleries as well, since you talk about museums and schools?
Yes. This very lively scene of galleries. Also a lot of young galleries open in the last years, which is maybe unusual because the economic situation was not that you expect young galleries to open, but in Düsseldorf there is a very lively turnover.
Compared to Berlin?
You live at the Kunstakademie in Berlin, how does that differ? And does the government function the same way in Berlin?
No, Berlin is much bigger, and so the influence of the art academy, there are actually 2 art academies, but you couldn't feel it in the city. It's a very cultivated city, a lot of art institutions, but there's not a strong influence of the academies. But in Düsseldorf you can feel that. And the academy also has got a very important position in the city administration, at least in the cultural part.